From the Chesapeake Bay Journal, your source for independent environmental reporting, this is Chesapeake Uncharted, the podcast that uncovers stories about the bay, its interconnected ecosystem, and the people who rely on them. I'm Jeremy Cox. On today's episode, if you're a fan of ballet, you probably recognize this melody from Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. Well, let's call this Swan Bay because we're going to be doing a flyby on the topic of tundra swans in the Chesapeake Bay. This is the fourth in our series of episodes spotlighting the new Bay Journal film, Chesapeake Rhythms. So far, we have learned about eels and monarch butterflies. Today, we'll talk to the film's producers about why they wanted to tell the story of these curious-looking birds and how they did it. But first, let's listen to the Tundra Swan segment of the film. You can see the entire film and its gorgeous images at bayjournal.com/films.
In late fall, slants of afternoon sun burnish the hues of autumn foliage. High above, a V of tundra swans halloo their arrival. They are among the most magnificent birds in North America and the largest of waterfowl. Traveling thousands of miles from the high Arctic summer to their winter home on Chesapeake Bay. The swans master the buffeting wind as if carving their descent from some firmer, more stable substance than thin air. As the birds approach touchdown, their aerodynamic lines begin to reshape. Sinuous, fluid, necks arch, breasts swell. Big paddle feet swing smoothly down to break their forward motion. Wings cup, curve, back paddle the air. A gentle plish of water parts to embrace the tired travelers. In Britain, there's a word for this glorious return. Swanfall, it is called, because the birds seem to almost drop from the sky once they reach their wintering grounds. The swans at first do little but rest and sleep, floating with long necks coiled across their backs, bills tucked into a wing. They're among the wariest of waterfowl, and as they root close to the marsh bank for soft clams and the nutritious root systems of underwater vegetation, one of the adults is always on the lookout for the slightest movement of a raccoon, a fox, a human. Some 100,000 tundra swans migrate east from Alaska and the Yukon, on the wing up to 9,000 miles a year, coming and going. A majority wintered on the Chesapeake until declines of seagrasses and clams shifted greater numbers to coastal North Carolina. Overall, the population is stable and healthy. From a distance, they look like snowbanks, or ice floes clumped together. December slips into January and February, when the swans are often joined by thousands of snow geese. One day in mid-March, the angle of the sun, the growing length of daylight, triggers something deep in the swan's ancestral memories. It's time to be leaving. Then it is quiet. The bay has lost its wildest voice until swanfall comes around again.
Hi, this is Laura Lutz, editor at the Chesapeake Bay Journal. I hope you're enjoying our podcast, and I'd like to invite you to join the community of Bay Journal readers. If you care about climate change, wildlife, clean air, healthy communities, and of course the Bay and its rivers, you'll find news you can use at the Bay Journal, along with some great ideas for outdoor travel. Our subscriptions are free. Check us out at bayjournal.com and click on subscribe to start receiving the best independent environmental news in the Bay region.
Welcome back. On this season of Chesapeake Uncharted, we're taking a behind-the-scenes look at the Bay Journal film Chesapeake Rhythms. It explores the migration of 4 creatures that spend at least part of their lives in the Bay region. Today, we're spotlighting tundra swans. My colleague, Lauren Hines Acosta, spoke to the film's producers about these birds. Let's take a listen.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm Lauren Hines Acosta. This season, we're taking a behind-the-scenes look at our film Chesapeake Rhythms and explores the migration of 4 creatures that visit the Bay. In this episode, we'll be exploring the beauty and grace of tundra swans with the film producers. Dave Harp directed the film and acted as cinematographer. He is a photojournalist and has been capturing the Bay on film for more than 30 years. You can hear Tom Horton in the film as the narrator and writer. He has written about the Chesapeake Bay for the past 50 years. Sandy Cannon Brown edited the film. She owns a film production company and taught environmental filmmaking at American University. Thanks so much for being here. A basic question to start out with. Why did you guys choose to focus on tundra swans? I know, Dave, you're a pretty big fan.
Well, they're big, beautiful birds that have a very interesting story. They're only here for a short period of time, and I think I appreciate them more because of that. As I said earlier, I never tire of going out in the early morning or in the afternoon in November and hearing the swans fly overhead on their way. They're wahooing on their way from the Arctic or from the tundra down to the Chesapeake Bay and further south. They're such a delight to photograph. They're these large white birds that take on the color of whatever light is shown on them. So in the early morning and evening light, they turn pink on a sunset, and during the day they're almost impossible to photograph because they're so much white light blasts off of them. So I've learned how to photograph them, and I learned when to photograph them, especially when it's snowing and times like that.
Yeah, I always run a field trip with my Chesapeake Bay class at Salisbury University, where we go out and either at sunset when the swans come in from feeding to rest on protected waters, or sometimes in the morning. Swans are kind of good for morning bird watchers because they don't fly out to feed from wherever they rest till 8:30, 9:30 in the morning. They kind of like to lay in and loaf. But it grabs my students' attentions because the sight and the sounds. I mean, a swan's got a 3-foot windpipe. You can do some pretty cool tunes with a 3-foot windpipe. Somebody told me that was about the length of the air passage in a French horn or something. I don't know, but it grabs their attention, and it's a real good entry point for me to talk about the wider aspects of migration and just the long distances. I mean, I don't know where you would say is home for these birds. Alaska, the Chesapeake, or on the wing. They're probably in migration almost a third of their lives, and they can go for 10, 12 years in some cases. That's 9,000 miles a year round trip for over a decade. That's pretty amazing.
And I live in Cambridge, Maryland, on the Choptank River, and I'm only about a half an hour from Blackwater Wildlife Refuge. And over the years, that's where I go every winter. I'll go down. My wife and I sometimes go down, and she'll sit in the car doing the crossword puzzle in the New York Times while I'm out freezing, trying to get pictures of swans. But it's great to be near a place like Blackwater. And, like I said earlier, I love photographing swans in the snow. It's just a really nice combination.
Yeah.
And the year that we made this film, we had about 15 minutes of snow. It just was a dry winter. And it started snowing the one time it did snow that winter. And I jumped in the car and drove down to Blackwater and started shooting. And the snow lasted, I'm not exaggerating, the snow lasted maybe a half an hour. And I think we used about 20 minutes of that. Sandy can say about 20 minutes of that in the film because it was the best of all in the entire film. I think it's some of the best work. The best views, the best scenes are those snow scenes with the swans shot in slow motion landing in the snow.
That's probably one of the lessons of wildlife photography is you have to go when you have to go. I mean, Dave goes out in the middle of the night, goes out and if you need rain, he has to go out in the middle of a rainstorm. So it's very hard to do a film like this especially on a low budget. You cannot assemble a team when the snow starts falling. Dave just gets out there with all of his gear, no matter what time, and does it.
Well, as I understand, Dave and Tom, y'all collaborated on a book for young readers called Swan that you've mentioned. That work is going on 34 years now. So what has changed for Tundra swans between the writing of that book and then the production of this film?
The numbers of swans were and are fairly healthy. As I recall, the total East Coast migration of swans coming from the West Coasts, but the ones that come east, 60 or so thousand. There have never been millions of these swans. When we wrote Swanfall, I would say about 40,000 of those 60,000 were on the Chesapeake. But even then, they were beginning to shift down into the Carolinas because their favorite food, submerged aquatic plants like eelgrass, and down there it's probably a different kind of grass, just were hanging on better in coastal Carolina than in the Chesapeake, where we've polluted a lot of eelgrass, and the bay's getting too warm for eelgrass. Now, the swans have been one of those waterfowl that adapted somewhat to this by going to feed in the farm fields. They'll eat leftover corn and grasses and so forth. But still, the aquatic grass is their favorite, and so the population shifted. I would say that might be the biggest change. Hunting for swans, there's a couple states now, Virginia and North Carolina, that now allow limited hunts.
Right.
Very limited. It's a quota system or a lottery system. Maryland, it's interesting. I've talked to lots of people up here who would gladly shoot geese and any species of duck, and they just think it's horrifying that we might hunt swans. And it's not logical. It just is.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm with them. I've hunted geese and ducks in my life, but I never had an urge to have an open season on swans. Even though ecologically we could probably support a very limited season, but no one wants to do it.
I can't imagine shooting such a magnificent creature, though.
We do have the invasive mute swans too, which people do want to eradicate. And I know that the state of Maryland many years ago did kill off about 3,000 of those swans. And people do need to know the difference between the mute swans with the yellow beaks and the tundra swans with the dark beaks.
Yeah, we've pretty much eradicated the mute swans, and it wasn't the mute swans' fault. We brought them here. They were not a native species, and unlike the tundra swans, which leave in March to go back to Alaska and the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, the mute swans stayed year-round, where they competed with native birds for nesting space. They also ate prodigious quantities of our fairly endangered seagrasses.
I think one other thing that, and of course as a photographer, I know this quite clearly, that tundra swans are very skittish birds, and they don't like people. They don't want to be near, any too close to them, which makes it very difficult to photograph them. Other species of swans, for some reason, are much easier, and herons and egrets and a lot of the other big birds. For some reason, tundra swans are just really skittish, and if you get anywhere near them, they just swim away or fly.
Yeah, we've tried drifting down on them in kayaks, and you just don't get too close to them. You need big lenses or to hide in a blind somewhere where they're coming in.
Yeah, Sandy was yelling at me a lot as the editor about shaky pictures because, I'm still learning how to use long lenses shooting video. When you're shooting stills, you just crank up the shutter speed and you don't have movement. But that long lens, I have one that's equal to 1,000 millimeters, that any little movement of like wind is a big problem. Creates pictures that just aren't usable for the editor to work with. So still on the learning curve, but we got enough, I think.
And the winds did not cooperate for you. I mean, you're out there with a long lens and a shaky tripod and winds going 12, 13, 14 miles an hour.
Right. Yeah, and you're putting sandbags on the lens. You're doing all kinds of things to try to. I remember the initial scene in the film is the moonrise, and that was a really difficult shot for the same reason. It's a long lens, and it was blowing about 15, 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear in the film that you had to visit a lot of different locations at different times of the years to get the swan footage. So you kind of touched on it, but yeah, what did you have to do to get all those shots?
Well, as Sandy said earlier, you have to go where the animals are and when they're there. One of the places that Tom has found over the years is the sewage treatment lagoon at Hurlock, Maryland sewage treatment plant. For some reason, the swans go in there at dusk and leave at somewhat after sunrise. And some of the scenes that we shot, it's like captive birds. I mean, they're right there. They're fairly close by. And even though I'm using long lenses, it's really a great location. And then of course Blackwater was just invaluable. And we went up to Pennsylvania, where in March when the swans are staging, heading north, they meet at this Fish and Wildlife Refuge called Middle Creek, where they're there by the hundreds and sometimes thousands before they collectively head north.
Well, it's interesting that these gorgeous, wild, globe-girdling birds are going in for the night on sewage treatment ponds, which are next to a solar farm, which is next to a sod farm, which is taking over a lot of traditional agriculture to put sod on suburban lawns. So you got swans, solar, sewage, and sod. I think there's an essay in there somewhere, but I'm still trying to figure out what it is.
Sandy, what mood, if you had to convey in just one word, were you trying to convey in this segment?
Awe. AWE. I think that's what, looking at a swan, that's about all you can really say is they are beautiful, they're amazing, and Dave brought them to the screen.
You may have to explain it to me, but so the tundra swans population seems to be fairly stable now. So what do you think has contributed to this species' relative success?
You know, some species are just more adaptable than others. And like Dave said, the skittishness of the tundra swans really works in their favor. They just don't let people get that close. And they were able to adapt to feeding in farm fields to make up somewhat for the loss of their favored foods in the bay. Not all waterfowl were able to adapt. Redhead and canvasback ducks are pretty scarce on the Chesapeake now. So some of it's just being adaptive. The fact that people in our region don't really want to hunt them, because you could kill them if you hunted them hard. You could find ways to lure them in with decoys or whatever. And
they're a big target.
So, and the other end of things, their nesting territories are up in on the Arctic tundra, where there's not a little bit of oil drilling up there, but basically 99% of the tundra is still open space for swan nesting. So that's the other part. Another swan, the trumpeter, was shot out of here almost 200 years ago, shot and trapped for its feathers, for fancy hats for ladies in Europe. Trumpeters have actually started to come back. There's just a few nests around the bay, and I think I know why they got shot out. Dave and I walked so close to a pair of them a couple months ago. I actually chunked a rock at them to try to get them to fly for the camera. They just sat there and looked at us. I mean, we could have shot them with a pop gun. And I wonder if they were just a lot easier to kill than the tundra swans.
Yeah, we were amazed at how easy it was to get close.
Yeah,
to them,
I thought they would take off
we're so used to tundra swans.
They just, so a similar looking bird, very similar genetically, and yet very different in their aversion to humans.
Well, that was really all my questions regarding the swan segment. So thanks so much, Jan.
Sure.
Thank you.
That was Lauren Hines Acosta speaking with the Bay Journal filmmaking team, Sandy Cannon-Brown, Dave Harp, and Tom Horton. Let's look beyond the documentary now. I spoke with two wildlife biologists about their work with tundra swans. William Morris is a wildfowl biologist for the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. He goes by the nickname Hunter. And Kayla Harvey is the waterfowl program manager for the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. Migratory species like tundra swans don't care about political boundaries, but humans do. Maryland and North Carolina come at managing these iconic birds from different angles. Maryland bans hunting of tundra swans. North Carolina allows it. The number of permits issued from year to year is tied to the previous annual survey, Morris told me.
So the way we monitor it is based on a 3-year average of these midwinter surveys. So with that in mind, next year, if our midwinter count is below 70,000, it will drop our long-term average below 70,000, which then kind of leads us into some different discussions of where do we go from there. We would see a 25% reduction in tundra swan hunting permits if we do drop below that 70,000 number. So that's an immediate built-in step.
North Carolina can't just pick its own number out of the air. Federal wildlife officials set a cap in the eastern region. Then, the states that do allow hunting divvy up that number among themselves.
So for the eastern population is allotted, I think it is 5,600 permits for the eastern population. Those are currently divided between Delaware, Virginia, and North Carolina. North Carolina, we take the lion's share of that, so to speak, with almost 4,800 permits of the 56 are here.
Morris and Harvey agree that the tundra swan's eastern population is relatively stable and healthy, but the distribution of that population has changed over the years. Around 10,000 tundra swans overwinter in the Maryland portion of the Chesapeake Bay each year. But there used to be 3 or 4 times that number, Harvey said, in part because of the decline in meadows of underwater grasses, known to scientists as SAV.
It's sort of happened in the 60s and 70s. There was a major Hurricane Agnes, that wiped out a lot of the SAV in particular the Susquehanna Flats region of the bay, which was a big wintering area. And then I think also just agricultural changes kind of pushed them a bit further south.
South to Morris's neck of the woods. Most tundra swans are drawn to the vast expanse of wildlife refuges on the peninsula just landward of the Outer Banks, between the Albemarle Sound and the Pamlico River. As the Chesapeake swan habitat declined, human changes brought more favorable conditions to North Carolina.
North Carolina was a lot of land clearing and conversion to ag at the time, to the 60s and 70s. With that all happening at the same time as the decline of the bay, kind of just a natural shift through those years of late 60s into the early 70s, and then by the late 70s we had jumped up from 10,000 birds to already up into the 40s, 45,000. Really from the 70s on, it's kind of just been a gradual increase, which some of that is probably habitat related, but also just that the population was steadily increasing at the time as well. So probably a combination of all of those factors.
What's the best way to ensure that the tundra swan population doesn't crash?
I would say that the restoration of Chesapeake Bay is important, with keeping our SAVs increasing and restoring those. And then, that's important to, keep seeing these beautiful birds.
I just wanted to drop in here before the theme music plays to just let you know that if you like what you're hearing with Chesapeake Rhythms, you can see it as well. And you can find that video on the Bay Journal website at bayjournal.com and search under the Multimedia tab. Or you can find it on our YouTube page. Just head over to that YouTube search bar and type in Chesapeake Bay Journal. Okay, on with the credits. Chesapeake Uncharted is brought to you by the Bay Journal, an independent nonprofit environmental news source for the Chesapeake Bay region. This episode was produced by Jeremy Cox and Lauren Hines Acosta. The story was edited by Laura Lutz. Our marketing and advertising director is Jackie Kane. You can find more episodes of Chesapeake Uncharted on your favorite streaming service or on our website, bayjournal.com. If you like what you're hearing, sign up for a free Bay Journal news subscription too, also on our website at bayjournal.com. Until next time, this is Jeremy Cox. Take care.